The Face of War from Iowa. Ryan played down here.
I don't know where the other head is though. It's down there somewhere.
Looks bigger on camera.
Well, there's two snakes there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's why.
I don't see the second head anywhere.
Second head.
No, I do.
I've never really talked about that to
Granted,
She was in Sayreville now. We should just come up there.
I don't want to feed her and then hold her up over and then feed her.
Yeah, I'd rather you,
She's been kind of bite happy as of the past couple of months.
do they really have teeth or do they like
Oh,
it?
yeah, they have teeth.
Do they just have 4? It's like 2 up, 2 at bottom?
They have a row, kind of like a shark-ish.
Huh.
And they are all very, very sharp.
Yeah, Joe's a scared fucking snake.
Yeah, it's a big fear.
What an idiot.
Who is this?
Yeah,
Oh, this fucking run through a temple. And from boulders and shit.
I always like the toughest people in the world that are afraid of spiders too. I'm like, are you kidding me?
One time I was down here with Justin Ogden, formerly of Letdown, now in Wrong Answer, and I had a berm that was about twice this berm size. And he was like, yo, can I hold it? You know, like whatever, he worked up the courage. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. So I picked him up kind of like, you know, a ball like this. And I gave it to him, and her head swung down, and she bit him on the thigh. And he was like, oh. Like he looks at me, he's like, is this too poisonous? She like started freaking out. I was like, it was awesome. I know a few. Her name is Daisy. Very
Daisy.
Scary name.
All right.
Have any snakes ever gotten out?
Yeah.
Been around the house?
Yeah, kind of. It's
All right.
kind of a running thing for a while. We just had like random snakes like show up on the stairs and
Crooked.
stuff.
Did we go off balance? Like, I like the shot, but I mean, do you think that?
No, it's not off balance. See that in the bottom
Do you
there?
need me to
Okay.
move?
No, you're
Now you're good. We're gonna start this up.
Hold on, I'm just gonna turn the audio on in a spot.
Hold its head because I'm gonna grab the questionnaire so it doesn't. What you say? Bite happy.
Yeah. Do not bite my friends.
At least till the interview's over.
Origin of Reign Supreme. Well, Reign Supreme started out of the Jay Pepito left blacklisted in I think it was about 2005 or 6, and he had riffs, you know, wanted to use them. So I guess he pieced together some people and got a demo recorded, and I met him at a show outside of Lansdale, VFW, that he came and was handing out demos at. And, you know, I met him and I was like, hey, I used to be blacklisted, you know, whatever, my name's Dave. You know, thanks for coming out. You know, not many people come to the shows in the suburbs from the city and stuff, so whatever. And he gave me it and I loved it, so I was hyping it up online and stuff like that, and they caught on pretty fast. Like, they put out that Dead by 23 record and they were doing pretty well. And then I was in Pale Horse at the time and I was on tour and I got an email from them saying that they were looking for a guitar player, and you know, they wanted me to try out. But at the time, I was wrapped up with Pale Horse, so I was like, hey, you know, I got too much on my plate now. I'm sorry. But like literally like a week later, Pale Horse decided to break up or disband or whatever. So I called him back on the way over to Connecticut, and I was like, hey, I'm trying to play. He's like, all right, you know, come hang out. And we, you know, practiced a couple times and it worked out. So yeah, basically that's at least the story with me and Reign Supreme. The other guys just kind of were picked up along the way. Jay's the only original member, and Dotto, the other guitar player, who played with them pretty much the whole time, too. That's all right. This is Daisy. She is an albino Burmese python. I got her from a guy, Doug, that works at High Roller Tattoo in Westchester, good tattoo artist. He had a roommate that left this snake and another ball python, like, just left the house and left these snakes behind, and he knew me from, like, Centrifuge or something that I, you know, had a reptile rescue, and he hit me up. He was like, hey, you know, I got these snakes. Would you want them? So I drove down there, picked them up. She was about, you know, yay big. You could fit her in one hand at a time. And she's the other snake passed away because it was not in good shape. But yeah, she's still kicking. Well, I've always been kind of like one of those animal kids. Like I've always, you know, when I was a little kid, I never grew out of the dinosaur phase. I just like snakes, and I like all animals really, except horses. Let's be real, horses are stupid. But yeah. When I was 18, when I just graduated high school, I worked at a pet shop in Lansdale, and it was it went out of business basically. It went bankrupt, and literally overnight the landlord for the place changed the locks on the door so nobody could get in, and it was this big thing. Like it was, you know, in the paper, like, you know, animals locked in store, blah 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 blah. We were like, oh wow. So me and this other kid actually broke into the store, and we you know, fed all the dogs, whatever, and like I ended up just taking all the snakes and stuff because the SPCA was just like, we can't, you know, house these. So I ended up with like, I had a few pet snakes at the time and pet lizards, but I ended up with like 40 overnight. So it was
You didn't get any trouble for breaking and entering, I guess, because of what you were doing?
pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's not like the cops came. There was no alarm on the door, so I mean,
Yeah.
I think the power was also shut off. But it's I mean, there was literally dead animals in there. Like there was a couple snakes dead because it was like 3 days without water, which under the wrong circumstances can be deadly for an animal. There's a bunch of mice like eating other mice. It was not good. Well, I've always been a musical kid. Come from a musical family. All my cousins, my mom's side, my parents, they've all been musicians and stuff of some sort. Played the piano when I was a kid. Started playing the trombone when I was in 4th grade, and I played drums for a little bit too, but never went too far with it. But when I was, I don't know, about 13 or so, I started to get into heavier music. Saw a couple videos on MTV I liked or whatever. Heard Pantera. It was over. But,
Yeah,
hi, Dad.
never have taken that shit.
Yeah, see that? Great. Thanks for the support. But yeah, no, like actually, yo, Dad, come here.
Hey, by the way,
What?
what's it, Daisy?
Yeah,
Daisy likes the Boss Towns.
Daisy likes the Boston.
But
There you go. This is my dad, Steve Heck. I just want to put on the record that when I was 14, what venue did you drive me to in New Jersey? In Asbury Park.
Stone Pony.
Stone Pony, yeah. 14 years old. I was rocking the Stone Pony, no joke.
Sweet.
That's cred right there. Good parenting, too. Actually, it was this dude named Matt Terzo, which the Terzo family was kind of infamous in Lansdale. They had a band called Blue Collar Underworld, which was like a hardcore band. And their older brother was in a band called God Lives Underwater, which was pretty successful for a little bit, for a hot minute in like the 90s. But I was in jazz band with the kid Matt, and he's like, hey, come check out my band sometime. So I did that, and I was like, hey, cool. And I think the first time I saw Dysphoria was at the Knights of Columbus in Lansdale. And that night, I bought their CD, and I remember just being like, this is the best band I've ever seen in my life. And like that's like that night I went home, and like the next day my parents went to church, and I like blasted the CD and like drummed along with like fake drumsticks and stuff. And it was all downhill from there. Well, that's the thing, geographically, PA is a right alongside Jersey, the tri-state, Delaware, and New York, whatever. It's kind of like Connecticut. Like Connecticut gets looked over too. Connecticut has a great hardcore scene. But, everybody says, New York City, Boston, they don't think about the in-between. Kind of like here, people think Jersey, but I mean, all of North Jersey just wants to be New York, all of South Jersey just wants to be Philly. So, I mean, this is kind of how it works with sports teams, with music, whatever. But when people they hear about magnet cities, and New York hardcore is obviously the most infamous hardcore there'll ever be. It's where it pretty much got famous out of, that in D.C. Philly's always had a really strong music scene, but it just never quite caught on like it did with other cities. It was more of a grassroots movement. People from Philly stayed in Philly, worked it up a lot. I mean, this is all way before my time. So, but by the time I got into it, PA had a very established scene, and it was for all the right reasons. I mean, the people I met that are still around today, they instilled values and stuff upon kids basically, kids like me, and just say like, hey, this is how we do things around here. Not saying you have to do it like this, but we like to keep it that way, and it's always been a very nice place to go to shows and be a part of. Lansdale scene, very old, very historic scene, really, for a suburb. Lansdale was a living district, which basically means it is a city, but obviously it's a suburb outside of Philadelphia. And it just so happened that there was a couple bands and a club or two in the early 90s. It may have gone even back farther than I know, but to my knowledge, the early 90s with bands like Pummel and Dysphoria started in 1993. They were actually from Bucks County, but they magneted it to Lansdale because they had the clubs, and met up with people, like people like Bands of Shine, 13 PFP, all the people that are pretty much the godfathers of the Lansdale scene now, and that's how it all started. We had a couple good clubs, and again, like I said, with PA having a lot of good influences and people doing the right thing, and Lansdale was definitely like that. We always had a music scene. It was more of than necessarily a hardcore scene, but we definitely had a good. I mean, we had Dysphoria. That's like that's all we really needed. But we had we had and still do have a great music scene and great hardcore scene. Well, mostly it's VFWs and halls and lounges and stuff like that. When I was very young, in like middle school, there was a place called Jumpers that is now in Lansdale, which it got torn down and turned into an Acme. But that place had shows. Dysphoria played there a bunch, Chine, PFP, all those bands. And that place closed, and then they started doing shows at the Knights of Columbus in Lansdale at 8th and Kenilworth, and then 5th and Maple at Celebration, St. Marie's, and those shows caught on kind of like wildfire because the Northeast PA hardcore scene had CCs and the venues up around Scranton and Wilkes-Barre or whatever, and then Philadelphia had its own scene, which I mean was kind of young at the time. When you're talking about like the hardcore scene, where for the people that are still around at least, and it was kind of a meeting point, in the middle, both geographically and socially, because we were a hardcore scene, but we weren't quite in the sticks, we weren't quite in the city, so people came out, and it was always it worked to our advantage. Well, hardcore is a lifestyle. I come from the '90s, so I come from when hardcore was a way of life. It wasn't an internet message board. It wasn't whether or not it was heavy or fast paced. It was just whatever. Like I said, with Lansdale, it was a music scene. It was a hardcore scene, but that's what it was. It was stand up for yourself, do what you do. Don't back down to people. People might call that kind of a pussy argument. If you don't want to fight people or whatever, but if you stand up to them, that's still it's hardcore. That's you're standing up for yourself, doing what you're doing, not hiding behind anything, being real. Well, I mean, honestly, before PA Hardcore, when it was hardcore.kickinass.com, and I wasn't even on the site, but I knew of it, and it was when the internet came into play. There was like the East Coast Hardcore message board, and then there was like that one, and like the other thing, there wasn't message boards, there was guest books. So like people like would go on the punishment guest book, and that's where I got made fun of by all the Philly kids. Or like I went on PA Hardcore when it was more kids from Phoenixville and Lansdale and like Northeast PA whatever, and it's a little more open-minded, and it would always it's like anything, it's a communications tool. So there's nothing bad about that. Sure, there's like the shit talkers, or there's drama, whatever. People definitely have gotten beat up over things posted on that site, but for the most part, it's a great place to advertise your band. Advertise shows, meet new people. I have some of my best friends I have, Tommy in California, all Dennis, Delaware, all those people that I met, I would have met, through shows, but I talked to them on that site, and that's how we hooked up, and we're still great friends today. It probably wouldn't have happened without Brickhouse on that site. It's kind of weird, people, hardcore to a lot of people is just music, and when you're young and you get super into it, it's like, everything, you're like, oh my God, like, this is my life. Like, I want to tattoo it to my face, and I don't want to do anything else with my life. Like, I was totally like that when I was a kid, and I never grew out of that honeymoon period necessarily, but I grew up in hardcore. I didn't, grow out of it. I grew up with it. I became a man, if you want to call it that. I'm 29 and kind of have a dead-end job or whatever, but like, I grew up and became an adult through hardcore and within the hardcore scene. So within the walls of that, it taught me everything I know. I have a great family. I'm not going to say I don't have a strong, background with that, but the hardcore scene taught me how to do things, how to, handle myself. And that, it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, like, sure that most kids might be, like 18 to 21 or whatever, but, if there's, that 4-year-old dude, like, still rocking a bandana in 2012, he's having fun, coming out and supporting hardcore, like, that's awesome, he goes home, he has his job, does his thing, supports his family, whatever, but, if he still likes the music and still wants to come out and support, something that's so intensely underground, really needs the support, that's awesome. So yeah, when people say that they grew out of it, some people grow out of it, some people grow up in it. That's the way it was for me. Well, like I said, Lansdale was kind of geographically and socially a midpoint between, the city and Philadelphia and like the rest of Pennsylvania, really, not just Northeast PA. But the crews and kids that came out of Philly in the late '90s and stuff, really, not to sound corny, but they didn't fuck around. They were, real deal, hood organizations, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, graffiti crews that turned into, hardcore crews, whatever. And they brought a style of dancing and, a style of like handling themselves to our shows that we were just like, what the hell's going on? Like, we went from like, doing like groovy floor punching things to like, literally like seeing ninja dudes like going back and forth and being like, what the hell, this is awesome, and like that rubbed off on kids like us. When I was a kid, we sort of fell into the trap for like, getting into fights and like, oh, it's cool to, mess up clubs, but we grew out of it fast. We had people like Chris Spear or Todd, the guys in Dysphoria, that were like, no, this like, you might think this is cool, but let me tell you, in a year, you're going to think, a lot differently. And it was really cool because they were very right. So, it's kind of like when you have your parents, say your parents were poor when they grew up and they worked real hard to do something and, have money for someone, for their family, and then like, those kids become like, kind of spoiled. Like that's my generation. We were kind of spoiled. Like people put a lot of work into something, And we saw the hard times. We didn't go through them necessarily. We didn't necessarily get beat up. I mean, honestly, we did. But it stopped with us. You know, we were like, this is stupid. This is going to be a cycle. We're going to continue. You know, the people that do try to, you know, carry it out, you know, we just say, like, come on, dude. Like, you know, there's more of us than you. You're only bringing a bad element to a good thing. You know, that doesn't really necessarily happen in other scenes. Connecticut, Jersey, New York. Like, there's always troublemakers to this day. You know, people in their 20s and 30s that still act like, you know, they're 17 and they think it's, you know, cool to mess things up and just, you know, be very douchey and immature. But PA is not like that, you know. We have all the right things going on. People, not necessarily in charge, but the people that have been around long enough, you know, to command the respect, that have all the right mindsets, all the values that we've all had instilled in us, you know, they're all there. It's, you know, it's kind of cool. Like we were talking about before, like, you know, we kind of get overlooked. But obviously this is hardcore, is like a Philly thing, whereas Tsunami Fest is like a PA thing, more or less. But even those fests themselves, like you said, you know, people are all like, oh, New York hardcore, whatever. But, you know, the people, like the Super Bowl hardcore in New York, like bands will come over from Belgium for that or something like that. But, like, you know, people don't necessarily come over. I mean, there a few might, but, you know, there was a few weeks back at Tsunami Fest, there was multiple people from London, you know, from Belgium, Germany. Last year there was a ton of people from Japan. And, you know, they came here and they saw how awesome things are, you know. And that's what's really cool. I have a bunch of friends from Sweden that have been to almost every This Is Hardcore, and they will continue to come to them because they're like, yo, this is great, you know. And they see the Philly NPA as such a great scene, and, like, there's nothing wrong with it. And, like, you know, the average person, like, I know the first time I went to New York show, I was just like, it was at Castle Heights, and it was, like, you know, scary, and it was cool or whatever, but I was just like, this isn't quite what I expected, you know. You think it's going to be like this crazy, like, you know, black and white photo that you saw in, like, you know, in a magazine, but it's, you know, it's not. It's just a bunch of people just like anywhere else, you know. But the attitude and mindset in PA is definitely done good for itself. And the fact that we have such fests and really such scenes, you know, groups of people, you know, there is competition, but it's, you know, at this point it's at a minimum, which is really cool. People can kind of coexist and just do their own thing, you know. And honestly, I mean, almost any, not day of the week, but any week in the year, you have a handful of shows that you could go to, you know, on the weekends, sometimes on the weekdays. So if you want to go to a show and you live in Pennsylvania, you pretty much can. You know, there's never oh man, I wish there was a show like when you live in, like, you know, Maine, and there's a show every other, like, month that might be cool, you know. Mitch Martinez from PFP, Tom Grind from PFP, they taught me everything I know. You know, Chris Spear, Todd, Kramer, those guys have looked out for me forever, you know, whether it be, you know, traveling to, you know, Baltimore and, like, getting in a fight with somebody I didn't know and they, you know, back me up, or, you know, just even showing me how to do shows, how to, you know, promote shows and whatnot. You know, I learned everything from those guys. So you know, the guys in Shine, Kevin Mooney, you know, always helped me out, showed me, you know, it's not about just music, it's not about just, you know, looking cool and getting tattoos. I mean, all those guys, all you know, obviously Richie Crutch, Carl, Jotham, you know, those guys, Chris Nace, they've always just been the best of people, you know, like the older brothers that I never had. Never really needed because I have such an awesome family, but I had them anyway, so it was cool having two families looking out for me my whole life. But Fest 1?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's me on the flyer. That's the coolest part about that.
You?
Yeah.
Was that the dude where the kid who posted as a lost for words, like, stood up and walked out
I don't know.
and didn't pay the bands?
No, that wasn't that. This was, what was it? It was at the Underworld, I think. Or no,
Yes, that was the Underworld where
was
it
it?
happened. Yeah.
that one that was in, like, that corral, like, that looked
I
like
guess
a
he
ghost town.
didn't realize he didn't have enough money. He just left. He just didn't
Yeah.
say nothing, and, like, Joe Nunn was killing him on the boards the next
Yeah.
day. And he's like, everyone, I was so sick, I'm sorry, but, like, dude, you can't leave.
What did I do with the rats?
I didn't.
You set them down somewhere.
Oh, they're over here.
I
She
knew that.
smells them, too. She's like,
Is it eat it right in your mouth, or is that something you have to, like, set down?
You just kind of put it in front of them, and she's like, oh, cool, dinner time.
I
And she
was hoping
snatches
they
them.
were live rats, but that's even cooler. They're dead.
They
I always thought
they feed them live, so it's
I'm good. I mean, you could walk right up to it. That thing,
Plus, it's safe because it kills anything when you freeze them.
Is that bald?
Yeah.
that thing's huge.
Hey,
What is this thing doing? Because I gotta act like it's sneaking up on it.
nah, she'll probably just take it from here. Hey,